Going on YouTube, Cloverbell's here back with another Scarlet Violet video, and today we're going to be doing our last Regulation C video where we very briefly recap the North American International Championships. So if you don't know, that was basically the ultimate event of the format where we basically, more or less, once Regulation D started, this was basically the very last regional to occur, and the results are rather interesting, but what we're also going to do is just take a look at how some of this would even carry over into Regulation D, just to see how much similarities could the format have, and maybe a couple differences in how some of these teams would be, transferred over or displayed in that sense, right? Because, of course, we can always just fully recap this entire tour, but then, like, what would be the point, right? Because the format is over, so you might as well just take a look and see what some of this stuff has in store of Regulation D. But first, what we're going to do is at least take a look at the winning team and as well as the second place team. So for that, let's take a look at Alex Gomez. Again, he's the one who claimed it, so shout outs to him. And it was done with Dondozo. Again, if you remember what we said about Dondozo, maybe a couple weeks ago, right before the NAIC, is basically Dondozo failed to capture a regional title, right? It's one of those guys where, like, it's always going to be there. It's going to take second, third, fourth, or fifth place every single time, but it never gets the big first place championship win. And finally, with the biggest event in NA, that it finally got that win, right? So the interesting thing here is that the Dondozo did not have the Tatsugiri, and that begs the question is, did Dondozo ever really need Tatsugiri this whole time, or was it even quote unquote better without it, right? That's a question that you might have to ask later on, or maybe even ask as we start Regulation D. But for the most part, if you take a look at the rest of the squad, Dondozo aside, Dragapult and Chien-Pao, taking the crown yet again. This reminds me, of course, of Justin Tang, right? Remember when he basically claimed the crown with Dragapult Chien-Pao couple months ago, or was it a month ago? Yeah, I think it was like 2 months ago. Bandit Dragapult, of course, Sash Chien-Pao, very hyper offensive duo, very fast, hits very hard physically, so that's expected. Then you add the defensive backbone with Iron Hands and Tinglu, right? And that's what makes this team rather hard to break, because if you want to use special attackers to overwhelm this kind of team, the Tinglu can kind of just deter that just a little bit, and of course the pressure from the Iron Hands also helps a lot there. And of course, you just gotta slap on a Fluttermane on this somehow, right? Just because it's pretty much the #1 used Pokemon throughout Scarlet and Violet competitively. So Substitute helps a lot in some of those Trick Room matchups, of course, just by alternating the sub and protects. But then the Dondozo set over here is a Yawn set. Okay, so again, a lot of good positional play can come from Yawn, where the opponent has to make a decision. Do you want to switch out? Do you want to stay in and fall asleep? Or basically, if you do switch out, are you willing to take the free damage that you have that's coming in, if you do decide to switch out? So it's a really cool team. I like it a lot. And again, I beg the question, did Dondozo need Tatsugiri this whole time? We may never know. Okay, moving on. If we take a look at second place, right, from Rogov, it's a Rain team, and Rain has been pretty cool in Scarlet and Violet thus far. I felt like in every single format that we've had, whether it was Regulation A, B, C, and now even into D, I feel like Rain has always been strong, which is really nice in terms of that, right? It's not just all about Sun. The Rain can also give you some good offensive play. Great wins here, and that's pretty obvious here, not just with Rogov's team, but if you take a look at the rest of the tour in general, there's a few of these Rain teams, but Rogov's is the one that got second here. It's a Specs Fluttermane with Trick Room. That's the first thing that I look at, because typically you don't see something like a Trick Room here with a choice Specs item, but it has been done already before, so it's just you can always just switch it out, right? So there's that. It's a Goggles Arcanine with E-Speed and Protect. The Palafin has the Haze, which means the Amoonguss can get Protect, doesn't have to run the Clear Smog. No Tailwind on the Pelipper. It is just Wide Guard and Protect. Again, this is something that has been used before, but finally we get to see it within seconds. So it's a really cool thing to see Rain take second place here, a Weather team. All right, then we have the team that I felt like could win the whole thing. This 6 and it is basically this balanced duo with Tinglu and Iron Hands yet again, like we saw in the first place team. But then you have the Fire Water Grass core with the Flutter Mane slapped on it, right? You know, as expected, very easy team building here, but it's all about piloting the team. Of course, it's a Specs Chiyu with a Berry, Gyarados, and Taunt and Thunderwave, very standard set there. Now you have the clear Smog because there's no Palafin here, and this is a Swords Dance Iron Hands, something that again was also seen, you know, with this 6 in previous regionals. So yeah, and then, you know, as we go down here, we see a Sun team from Joe. He's been using that for a while. Marco has a very, you know, this is as close to a team that I like, you know, as far as like this 6, you know, with Garchomp and Flutter Mane, and then Gyarados, Chiyu, and Amoonguss, right? This is your Fire Water Grass card. The only difference here is, you know, I put Corviknight on stuff like this, but you don't need Corviknight. You do have the Iron Hands here, and then you have, you know, you have Sub Flutter Mane yet again, and then this is a Stone Edge Garchomp. That's pretty cool with Swords Dance. So, you know, just in case you want to intimidate this thing, you know, you can just Swords Dance back up to +1, right? So really cool thing there. Then we have Justin Knox's team, right? This is maybe the most interesting of the top 8, where we do get to see Grimmsnarl yet again claim another spot in the top cut, right? We always like our Grimmsnarl teams on this channel. Many of you know that already. And again, Iron Hands. By the way, you know, take a look. How many Iron Hands do you see in the top 8? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Iron Hands in the top 8. And you know what? This thing is not going away in Regulation D. I think it's even better in Regulation D, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But 6 Iron Hands within the 8, you know, expected. This is another Swords Dance Iron Hands. This one has Fake Out rather than Protect. There is a Lumberry here, so of course, you know, you don't want to get burned. You get one get out of jail free card. The Spirit Break, of course, with the Grimmsnarl neutering some of these special attackers. Light Screen Reflect, making the entire team bulky. It's an Acid Spray Iron Moth. You know, Iron Moth has been, you know, hasn't seen too much play, but Justin has been using Iron Moth for a while, so it's all about comfort at this point, right? When you're bringing this to an NAIC. So yeah, okay. As we move forward here, oh, this is another offensive team. You know, this is a very this is the Trick Goldengo with the Garchomp, Chien-Pao, Talonflame, Goldengo core, right? And then you slap on Iron Bundle and then a Dragonite here, as opposed to maybe something like an Iron Hands. Okay, good synergy there with Garchomp, of course, just because you can Earthquake next to it, you know. And then Dragonite, Chien-Pao, we already know what they can do. So very cool team there. And then from here, it's just all about like, okay, what are some of the other archetypes that were really good in Regulation C, right? So, for example, Orthworm was really good. And no surprise again to see it at the top in the culminating event for Regulation C. Now, I think it's also can be played a little bit in Regulation D. Just depends on how you want to use it. Like, there's no reason why you can't use Orthworm and Landorus, right, as opposed to the Gyarados on some of these teams, right? I think that could be one adaptation that some people will try. Here's another one, Dondozo with no Tatsugiri. I think this is the same team, right? It's the Sand Tomb Tinglu. I did try that at one point. It was pretty cool. But again, I beg the question, did Dondozo really need Tatsugiri? And then moving forward here, I think, you know, a lot of these teams that have like Talonflame, Tailwind stuff, I think you'll see them opt for Tornadus now, and we'll see what happens there. But like, for example, like Dragonite, Chien-Pao, Talonflame teams, like even this one, right? Yeah, Dragonite, Chien-Pao, Talonflame, like there's no reason why you can't like just slap on Tornadus here, right? Tell me why I can't do that. But of course, Talonflame has a couple things that it can do that Tornadus can't do, so maybe there is still some merit to using Talonflame, but that remains to be seen. All right, and then from here, where's another one that looks interesting? Oh yeah, Baxcalibur. So like Baxcalibur was always a good consistent mod in every single format. It always found its way within the meta at some point. And then it's also relatively good in Regulation D, just because, again, think about how many Landoruses there are. Think about how many Genies, Tornadus are running around. You know, Dragonite, again, doesn't want to have to deal with an Ice type. So Baxcalibur looks really good again in the Regulation D format. Think about Ursaluna as well. You know, a ground type. Ground types don't want to take Ice type attacks either, so go figure for that. So Bax looks like Bax is going to be back. All right, if you get my drift there. I don't know how much. Actually, I think the Arcanine goes into the Hisuian Arcanine. Now we get a more offensive Arcanine. I know people have been trying that as of late in Regulation D, so we'll see what happens there. But, you know, there is still some use for regular Arcanine, right? I don't want to put it past it, but there is still some use for that Pokemon. But these Palafin teams, like, I don't see why you can't just slap on an Urshifu now. Like, there is some advantage of having, like, a Palafin over an Urshifu. There is a little bit more bulk on the Palafin, of course. It does have a higher base stat in terms of its attack, but you can't crit all the time. You can't go through Protect, okay? And the Urshifu is at least a little bit faster, okay? The one thing that Palafin does have an advantage in terms of that is the defensive typing. You're not weak to flying types, which Urshifu is. So for that matter, okay, sure. But the question is now also, like, are there teams that would prefer Palafin over something like an Urshifu? Like, is there some other niche that Palafin can have that maybe Urshifu cannot give you, right? So that's another question that I pose in terms of how you want to play this, okay? And then as we go down here, you know, this one, Tom's team, right? Oh, by the way, shout outs to Tom, man. You know, he took that cool picture because, you know, he's going to Worlds, so shout outs to Tom, man. I know he's been working really, really hard, but like a team like this, look at this, like Armarouge, Indeedee, Torkoal, Hatterene, like this, you can bring this into, in fact, it's already been done. You can bring this into Regulation D and maybe just make one adjustment, maybe just swap out maybe either Orangu or Hariyama and just slap in something like Ursaluna or Glacier for that matter, right? And from there, just, you know, make some minor tweaks to the other four. But like something like this with Hard Trick Room with Indeedee, Armarouge, Hatterene, and Torkoal, that's already like a Regulation D thing. So that's not going away. So Tom can easily make an adaptation to something like this and put it for Regulation D if he so chooses. I don't know how good, you know, Hariyama versus like Ursaluna in terms of like which is the better Flame Orb mon. I feel like in some cases the Hariyama is just a little bit better, right? Versus the Ursaluna. So maybe that might not change. But I see very little reason why maybe even just this 6 alone can come back again. But it all depends on the format, right? But you know, Tom, if he so chooses, can easily very much adapt this kind of archetype into Regulation D. But Maushold and Annihilate, right? I know Maushold's going to be there, right? Will Annihilate be there? I'm not sure. Maybe. I feel like that's still a very, very strong archetype, you know, regardless. And it was throughout Regulation A, B, and C. So there's no reason why I can't do the same thing in Regulation D. I understand there is like a Hisuian Zoroark, but like you can still play around that. So I don't think it's the end of the world there. Here's back Scalper again. So it's interesting, like how maybe some of these teams can still be played in Regulation D. But here's another question I have. Let's go back up a little bit. You know, where is it? Yeah, let's go back to Josie. Yeah, not necessarily like the team itself, but like the Pokemon Great Tusk. Like, I have not seen that thing in Regulation D whatsoever. All right, maybe I've seen a couple, but there's no reason why you have to use this over something like Landorus. Like, tell me what Great Tusk can do that Landorus cannot. Okay, like you still get Earthquake. In fact, I think Landorus's Earthquake hits harder. You're not weak to Fluttermane, so in that sense, Landorus has the edge. And then, you know, a flying type, you know, you also get access to that as well. And then from there, you're faster than Great Tusk. And just overall, you have better special defense too. So tell me one thing that Great Tusk can do that Landorus cannot, right? Landorus even gets U-turn, so you can even pivot that out. I don't think Great Tusk gets U-turn, so... but yeah, maybe there's something I'm missing, but just in terms of Regulation D, can I play Great Tusk in Regulation D somehow? I'm not sure. That's another question I pose, right? Lots of questions we're asking, right? It just all depends on how the player wants to play this. This one was an interesting one, right? From Carson Confer. I feel like Wolf Click also had the same team with the Flamingo stuff. Here's the Tatsugiri, right? So again, we still see this. Like, here's another question. Like, will Dondozo still be played in Regulation D? I've seen a couple. I've seen some. I haven't seen a whole lot. But I feel like now that Regulation C is done and all the big time players are done playing that, now the shift goes to Regulation D. You know, can we see Dondozo do well in Regulation D? Is it worth playing? You know, are things still are things overwhelming it too much, where maybe the Dondozo is not the right play. Maybe we take a different direction, but who knows? I feel like it's still going to find its way back in some shape or form. I feel like it's always going to be there. It's like a very signature Scarlet Violet Pokemon that I think, right? But these are just some of the questions that I wanted to ask. But overall, you know, Regulation C was a fun format where we got to see a lot of different teams do very, very well, and a lot of the same Pokemon you'll see on a lot of different teams, right? Like, for example, Fluttermane is pretty much on every single team, but the way you can use it matters, and you know, the move sets, the items, the Terra, it just makes all the difference. And I think you'll see some of that more in Regulation D. But in terms of like in the beginning, I still think you'll see Dragonite Chien-Pao teams a lot, especially with Tornadus, Urshifu. I think that's always like going to be a good starting point for a lot of different people. And then from there, the Cresselia, Trick Room stuff, along with a balance core of like Heatran, Urshifu, and Rillaboom. You know, I expect to see that. And then from there, you know, just some of these other stuff like Sneasel, Rillaboom, that could be a thing. But, you know, now I'm just rambling on and on, right? But again, let me know what you think of how some of these teams from Regulation C can carry over into Regulation D. You know, we bid adieu to the format. But again, this is now heading into the World Championships next month. So people are going to be preparing. It's going to be the first time where I believe one tournament will be played in the new format for the World Championships. Usually you have at least a couple regionals with that format leading up to Worlds, but this is, I think, the first time where like, yeah, no, there's no regional practice where you can test something out for Worlds. This is it. So I expect to see a lot of online ladder tours. Maybe some locals will start to try and implement something. But yeah, we'll see what happens in Regulation D moving forward, right? The format's been basically played throughout on the online ladder, and there's a lot of results there that I think a lot of players can look back on, especially on the Limitless website if they're interested in building for that. But I digress. I think we're just going to cut it here. Right, but yeah, if you are interested in building for Regulation D, many of you have already done coaching sessions with me, but if this is you as well, feel free to sign up on the channel. It's a tier 3 sub. Look in the video description, there's a link to join the channel, or look in the comment section, there is a pinned comment with a link where you can join the channel with that tier 3 sub for team building, and then message me on Discord when you're ready to go, and then we'll plan our session, and then we'll coordinate and get the team that you need for the upcoming format. All right, but that's gonna be it for now, folks. We'll be back with another video in the next one. Rental codes. We're gonna get you some rental codes for Regulation D. Peace out and have a good one.